Hello, and welcome to Let's Talk Kenmore, a lighthearted podcast aimed at connecting our citizens to the city of Kenmore and demystifying the role of city government. I am your host, Amber Clifton. In this episode, our city engineer, John Vicente, explains how sidewalk locations are decided in the city. Make sure to check a future episode for an education on how sidewalks are built. Please enjoy this installment of Let's Talk Kenmore. Welcome to Let's Talk Kenmore. I am here today with our city engineer, John Vicente, and he is going to give me a rundown on installing sidewalks in the city of Kenmore. Hi, John.
Hello.
What can you tell us about sidewalks in Kenmore? Give me the scoop.
So we've got sidewalks here, there, places you wouldn't expect them, places you would expect them. A lot of our sidewalks in Kenmore were built by King County way back, starting when Kenmore became a residential community. And then developments came in, they had to build sidewalks, the county built sidewalks. So we have sidewalks that might be an entire length of the corridor, or they might just extend a few hundred feet. Just depends on where you're at.
Gotcha.
And then in 2013, our city council decided we needed to have a plan as to what we were going to do with our sidewalk network within the city, kind of create a prioritization to say, here's where we're going to put our investments first. And that created a lot of our capital projects. And since then, we've updated that plan. We actually updated it in May of 2022, where we incorporated about 159 projects on the list.
Whew.
Yeah, it's a lot of projects.
A lot of projects. You're probably going to get to this, but how are the projects prioritized?
So we used our current comprehensive plan to determine how to prioritize. Within our 2015 comp plan, we say, what are our priorities for getting pedestrians where you want to get them? And so based off of that comp plan, we created a series of scoring criteria. So the first one is relates to schools. So we give points for how close a sidewalk could be to a school. We get points for whether or not it's on a school walk route, where the kids would walk to school. And then we also give points as to whether or not the sidewalk is at a school bus stop area at the time that we're proposing the plan.
Right, because those can change, right?
Yeah, they can change.
Oh, okay.
So we don't give a lot of points for that. We only give about 2 points for that out of 80 points are the total, I believe. So a lot of points.
A lot of points.
Yeah. So the second thing that we look at is safety. So we look at what type of road is the sidewalk on? Is it an arterial, a collector, a local road? We also look to see if there's no sidewalk, is there a shoulder? And how wide is that shoulder? That kind of gives us some points, because if there's a 5-foot shoulder, it's a lot better for pedestrian than if there's a 1-foot shoulder.
Can you, sorry, I don't know what a collector road is. What does that mean?
Okay. So our roads are classified into different categories depending upon function and traffic volumes. So a major arterial is a road that gets people, that gathers all the cars together and gets them in and out of, say, the city. So our major arterials are 68th and Simons, because we get a lot of traffic coming from Kirkland and get to Kenmore to 522 and through and out.
Okay.
It's also one of the highest volume roads we have as well. So it's also based off volume. Then you have minor arterial, which is slightly lower volumes of traffic, and it's really bringing also cars regionally from local communities into Kenmore and out of Kenmore. Then you have collectors, which they collect all the local roads to one spot to get them to those major and minor arterials. And so that's a slightly smaller volume. And then you have your local roads where everybody lives and accesses their home to get to places away from their home. So generally that's kind of how it is.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
So the within the safety category, after roadway type and shoulder width, we also look at the volume, how many cars are on the road, and then we look at how fast they can go, the speeds of the vehicles. And then the next criteria is connecting the community. So we look at how far away would this sidewalk be from parks, transit, downtown, and public services.
That makes sense.
Then we look at the population served, where this sidewalk is going, how many people could potentially use it. So we give higher points to commercial areas and high density, and lower points to low density.
Like getting to shops and things like that.
Well, it's more of if we've got a sidewalk that's going to run next to a bunch of businesses,
Hmm.
and we have a sidewalk that's going to run a front of several single family homes, the business will get a higher priority because it's expected there will be more people using that sidewalk because people will
Right.
congregate to that. Same thing with high density housing. If we have a sidewalk going next to 100 housing units and another sidewalk going next to 10 housing units, the priority is going to go to the 100 housing units because there's theoretically more people using that sidewalk than the um, 10 or the smaller housing unit one.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then the final one is the network continuity. So we look at if we add a sidewalk, will that make existing sidewalk longer? So increasing the length of sidewalk. We also look at if we're putting a sidewalk here, is it closing a gap? So if we've got a space between sidewalks and we close that gap, that gets points. And we also look at do we have one big sidewalk network one place and another sidewalk network another place? And if we create a sidewalk between those two, we've then connected those two sidewalks with another sidewalk. So we look at how things are connected to each
Hmm.
other.
Mm-hmm.
So, so those are the criteria that we use to decide the priority for sidewalks. And then we look at each and every sidewalk that we're proposing, each project, and we determine what their score is. And based off their score, they're given a priority number.
Interesting. Okay. Is there any scoring mechanism that takes in resident feedback? Because I know we get a lot of resident feedback regarding sidewalks.
So the difficult part we have is everybody wants sidewalks.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard for us to say, okay, this group has been louder than this group, so they get a sidewalk.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. It's very rare that we run across anyone that says we don't want sidewalk.
Right.
Usually when people don't want sidewalk, it's because they don't want either uh, growth. You know, like this will bring more cars, this will
Oh.
bring more people. We want that peaceful, quiet, you know, I guess rural feel. And so a lot of times that's why they don't want it. A lot of times they don't want it because they may have some improvements that may get impacted by the sidewalk, and or they may lose parking that they're using on the street. So there's a lot of reasons people may not want a sidewalk.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, people all almost everybody wants a sidewalk, at
Mm-hmm.
least to get to where they want. Maybe not in front of their house, but they might want it at a certain location. So we do listen to what people want, but it's really hard for us to use that as a criteria for determining who gets sidewalk.
Okay. If
So
there's a neighborhood that wants, like they collectively want sidewalks and it's not going to happen with the city, are they able to figure out a way to do that themselves, or is that only through the city that this can happen?
So that's a complicated question. There are mechanisms for public um, involvement when it comes to putting in sidewalk. It's called a local improvement district, and we don't here at the city we don't have any program like that. And what the local improvement district says is that the city can't afford to put sidewalk into a certain location, so we're going to have the residents pay for a portion of it. That's about the only mechanism we have. We don't really look at you want a sidewalk, the neighborhood wants a sidewalk, so they're going to pay for it because that brings into equity issues that only the
Oh,
wealthy can afford sidewalks, and so the lower income folks don't get sidewalk because they don't have the money.
oh, that makes sense. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
so yeah, so we don't do that.
Okay. Wow. Interesting. And I know that with other projects, there's been, I don't know what the proper verbiage is for it. But add-ons, are sidewalks something that makes more sense to add on within a larger project?
So we do a lot of consolidation of work within some projects. As an example, on our 73rd Avenue overlay project that we're finishing up right now, that project was originally just going to be a pavement overlay. But we saw an opportunity to fix the damaged sidewalks along that corridor, take advantage of having a contractor, the impact of one construction period. And so we added work to that project using funding that we had specifically for that type of work. There are times when we will work on a project and say, for example, we're going to be putting in some storm drainage and there's going to be some digging in that area, and maybe we look at it and go, hey, we can put in a gap, fill in a gap with sidewalk here. Let's do that.
Wow,
It
yeah.
doesn't happen all the time, because usually it's still a funding issue. If we had the money to do it, and it was on our priority list, we would have done it already. But we do try and take advantage of those opportunities to include work if it makes sense on a certain project.
Gotcha.
The difficulty that we have and the reason why we have to prioritize is because we have limited funds. So the 159 projects we have, those are not streets. Those are projects. Projects are broken up into what I felt were bite-sized pieces
Hmm.
and reasonable ending points. So if we had a sidewalk segment that closed a gap and it was 3 blocks long, that would be a project. But if we've got a sidewalk that's really big, say for example on Simon's Road, we don't have sidewalk on the north part of the street from roughly 72nd all the way up to, gosh, I think 84th, and there's a gap, there's a little bit of sidewalk, then there's some more. That's a long
Right.
stretch. It's too
Hmm.
expensive to put that in one project. So I broke that up into segments to be, again, bite-sized pieces.
Oh,
And so
okay.
we've got a lot of projects that are just on one street, 4, 5, 6 projects that are on one street because of their cost. So the 159 projects I have, I would say it probably incorporates, we'll say, a couple of dozen streets, and that's about it. And the
Okay.
total, I mean, the cost that we assume right now for these projects is over $177 million.
Oh my gosh.
And that does not come close to building sidewalks all throughout the city. That's just the list. So $177 million, we don't have $177 million. So what I
177 million. I think a
yeah,
lot of people, myself included, think like you just pour some cement. Like, what's the big deal? But it's a pretty complicated project, right?
it's very, very complicated. First you have to figure out what you're going to do. Well, yeah, then you have to figure out where you're going to get the money. Once you figure out what you're doing, once you get the money, you have to start design. You have to look at what kind of grading do we need? Do we have utility impacts? Do we have to deal with surface water? Do we have to deal with private property owners because of either encroachments, or we might have to do acquisitions so we have the sufficient property? Then we have to look at environmental impacts. Then we have a public outreach process that we need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Then once all that's done, once we finally get that, we can finish our design.
Jeez.
Then we have to look at what's reasonable. Do we need hand railing? Do we need street trees? Do we need curb ramps? We have to start looking at all the little features that we need to incorporate into a project. Once we do that and we create a plan set, we review that, then we send it back for comments. It gets adjusted and done because nothing's done perfectly the first time out the gate.
No.
We have a couple revisions, and then when we finally have something that we really like, then we advertise for a contractor.
Oh my
And
gosh. We haven't even
yeah,
gotten a contractor yet. Yeah.
well, yeah, and the thing that's interesting, and this is where we get into the complication of projects, is you want to get them out to an advertisement at a right time. You can't just do it any time of the year because you may or may not get good bids, and
Mm-hmm.
we're kind of subject to whatever someone tells us the cost. So
Oh, okay.
that creates all those little complications. But getting back to our pedestrian facilities plan, everything's listed as a priority. We got 1 through 159. Problem we have again is we don't have the money to build these projects. And so what I have to do is I have to secure and hunt for grant funds to help us pay for these projects. The problem with that is that only certain types of projects are competitive for certain grants. And so just because I have a project that I'm saying is our number one project doesn't mean it's going to be competitive for any grants. So I have to look through the entire list and figure out which of these projects would compete well with a grant, and then I apply for the grant funds. That is why a lot of times you'll see our sidewalks getting built that are not the top priority. It's because we would rather build something on the list than not build anything at all.
Oh, because the grant is very specific about like what you can use it for, where all the things, right? So if you're building a sidewalk on some street that seems like it's not as dire as another street, that's why.
Exactly, exactly. The grant
Okay.
funds are very specific. They hold you very closely to their requirements and what you say you're going to do. The other complicated part with the funding is we have to also come up with matching funds. So they don't pay for 100% of the grant. So within our project, within our capital improvement plan, we identify city funds to work with grant funds. So if you ever take the time and want to read our budget, you'll see that we've got a line on there that says pedestrian facilities plan, and there's money outlined on there. That's not to build any specific projects. That money is there to act as match for grants that we can get for specific projects. Now, if
Gotcha.
we if we don't get any grant money, say we've got nothing coming up, then that money gets carried over to the following years, and then once it gets high enough, we can then do a project, the first project on the list.
Got it. That's interesting. So the grant scoring system then is different than our scoring system.
Oh yes,
So is it ever aligned where they're letting you use it for exactly what you wanted or felt like was most important in the city in the first place?
not really.
Okay.
So we've got a series of grants that are mostly competitive for us. One of the grants you must connect to a school in
Oh,
some way. So there's a certain distance you can be from a school before they say no, you're not connecting with the school. So if the sidewalk doesn't isn't within the school walk route for
hmm.
the school, then you're probably not going to get any funding from that grant. Then there's another grant that will pay for sidewalks, but you have to have a lot of components in there. You've got to have traffic calming, so the rectangular rapid flashing beacons or raised pavement or something, chicanes, little diverters that tell cars to, you're not going in a straight line now, you need to maneuver around these little obstacles. Those are the kind of things that this grant wants you to have. So we can't just build sidewalk. We now have to build all these other things to be
Oh,
competitive. So now we have to increase the cost of the project. So
got it.
another area where it's not just a sidewalk. We have to
Mm-mm.
add all this other stuff just to be competitive for the grant.
Wow.
Then there's a couple other grants where they want you to have innovative technologies. They want you to build sidewalks in um, low represented communities. There's so many different criteria that you have to meet to get these other grants, and it's very, very complicated to find the perfect project. And so I have to look at a project and go, okay, this looks like a good project for a grant. What can I add to it to make it competitive?
Wow. That's quite
Yeah,
the task.
it can be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Other than that, I mean, like I said, the ticket price is hard. Trying to build these projects, and the other issue that we have too is there's a lot of grant money out there, but there's also a lot of people out there vying for that grant money. When you hear, oh well, they did this, what is it, $1.2 billion transportation package with the federal government. Why aren't we building sidewalks all over the place? We only have $177 million worth of sidewalks. Let's get them built.
Hmm.
Well, there's the issue of there's a lot of people out there that want the money. We're not the only agency. But there's also the issue of even if we had all the money, to do it, there aren't the resources to do it. We need city staff to manage the contracts. We have three currently right now, and the projects we have are max out their capability to do anything more. Then you have to have enough engineering companies in your region to be able to tackle all of those projects, which is cumbersome because there's an engineering shortage at the moment. And then after that, you've got to have enough contractors in your area that can get the work done.
Right.
There's already not a lot of contractors. And then after that, you have to have enough materials to build all the stuff. So even if we had $177 million to work with and everybody had all the money in the world, we couldn't do it because there's not enough contractors, not enough engineers, not enough materials to get it built all at once. So we have to phase it appropriately.
Right.
And so even if we wanted to build them all right now, it wouldn't be possible.
Right. Oh,
So
wow. So much goes into it. So much goes
yeah,
into it.
yeah, it's not
Wow.
just and the interesting thing that most people don't know, the cost of the sidewalk, what you walk on out there, the concrete, that's probably the cheapest part of the project.
Mm.
In terms of everything else that goes out there.
It
Yeah,
sounds like it. Environmental
it's
issues and other people's property. And yeah, it sounds like
yeah, yeah,
just getting to the
it's
phase where you're making a sidewalk is the long part of the project.
yeah, it's not a huge factor in I mean, I'd say it's probably no more than 25% of your total project cost, just that sidewalk
Jeez.
alone. There's
Wow.
everything that surrounds trying to build that sidewalk takes up the rest of the budget.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you're the ADA person for the city, yes?
I say it's the term is the ADA coordinator.
ADA coordinator, sorry.
Yes,
So
yeah.
with older King County sidewalks that are no longer in compliance, do those take precedence over areas that don't have sidewalks at all?
So this is a different plan. We've got two different plans. We've got a pedestrian facilities plan, and we have an ADA transition plan.
Oh,
The
okay.
ADA transition plan addresses all of the existing sidewalk and curb ramps that are not compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. Within our budget, we've got also two different line items, one for pedestrian facilities plan for building new sidewalks and one for the ADA transition plan for fixing existing sidewalks. So they are treated and looked at separately. Uh, the thing that's also interesting is it's not the easiest to get money for sidewalk repair. It can be done, but to give you an example, we got grant funding to fix the sidewalks on 61st Avenue. The sidewalks on 61st Avenue are being uprooted by trees. Well, we
Mm-hmm.
got a grant for that. But to get the money for that, we had to put in bike lanes, we had to put in two flashing crossings, and we had to restrict we had to narrow the crossings on several locations of the corridor. We couldn't just fix the sidewalk. We had to throw in a
Right.
whole bunch of other things so that we could get the money.
Wow.
So yeah, yeah. So it's convoluted.
It really is. There's a lot that goes into it. Wow. I
Yeah,
had no
yeah,
idea.
yeah. It's crazy,
Crazy.
and it's changed so much in 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
20 years ago, you wanted to build a sidewalk, you just put in a grant to build a sidewalk. Now, there's the multimodal aspect added to it, and you have to do more than just build a sidewalk. You've got to
Right.
do other. It's really they're really no longer sidewalk grants. They're um, pedestrian facility grants. Really, is what they are,
Mm-hmm.
and everything that supports non-motorized activity is um, get you points on the grant, and that's what they want you to put into your grant application.
Yeah, that
So
makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah,
Wow. Ugh.
and that's just those grants. There are there are federal grants that look at. There are federal grants where we could apply for sidewalk, but to get those grants, they have to provide. They have to be within a commercial district or serving a commercial district. A lot of times, they have to have some sort of destination where if people are going to congregate in this area,
Mm-hmm.
then that's kind of a scoring criteria. So if you're going to build sidewalks next to a school, or you're going to build sidewalks next to in the downtown, This one grant will give priority to the downtown because there's more people expected to use that sidewalk than the school.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that's how they rate and score. And so we get the money, but we can only apply for it at certain locations.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I've got to keep all these grants, in my head to figure out, okay, who's doing what, and then every year we have to find out what they've changed and pivot our criteria and what this project's going to have in it.
Wow, wow.
Yeah,
Well, you've got a lot of moving parts in your job. Jeez.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
What else about sidewalks that you want the people of Kenmore to know?
Well, the interesting thing about sidewalks, we are required to provide sidewalks of a certain width and a certain condition, meaning that they can't be too steep in any direction. We do have some allowances. If you're on a hilly road, then it can match the slope of the road, but a sidewalk has to be pretty much 5 feet wide. You can have 4 feet in areas, but after a certain distance of that 4 feet, it has to be 5 feet. So we have
Mm-hmm.
to pay attention to that. We have to make sure that it's perfectly flat. There can't be any lips to create trip hazards. We can't
Oh,
have
yeah.
gaps that are too wide. We can't have anything in the middle. We have to have a clear zone. We have to have we have to create what's called an accessible route. So we have to provide a specific width that is accessible to anybody with disabilities.
Okay. What would be something in the middle? You mean like a tree or a plant? Like what would be in the middle of a sidewalk?
A mailbox.
Oh, okay, okay,
Sometimes,
okay.
sometimes you might find a mailbox there. So if you plant a mailbox in the sidewalk, you have to have enough clearance outside of that to get past it. If you don't,
Oh,
then you're not compliant. So we have to take that into account. We have to take into account transitions. So if we've got a sidewalk and a curb, we have to ramp down. Those curb ramps require to be built a specific way to meet the requirements, the federal guidelines. State law says that if we disturb a crosswalk, we have to install compliant curb ramps. It says that if we install a curb ramp on one side and across the street there's just a curb, we now have to build a curb ramp on that side.
okay.
So we have to look into all those things when we're designing sidewalks. Is what are the state and federal guidelines requirements for accessibility? So even though we want to build a sidewalk in one section, we may have to take it further because of accessibility issues.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It just depends. Or we may have to. A lot of people will say, "Why are you needing my property? You've got enough room out there." I says, "Well, no, we've got this obstacle or this or that. We've got this issue, and we need the space to provide um, the space needed for the accessibility." We also have to deal with surface water issues,
Hmm.
rainwater, that sort of thing. Uh, we are required to mitigate for any new impervious surfacing that goes in if it reaches a certain threshold. So if we put in a certain amount of sidewalk, we now have to then address surface water.
Right.
How is the rainwater going to be addressed? And so that's why we have the one of the reasons why we have the planting strip next to the sidewalk is to take that rainwater.
Oh, it looks pretty too.
And it looks pretty. It's
Yeah,
good for the
it's
environment. It's always
functional.
nice to have those. Well, and that's the thing. This is something that some people may not realize is that amenity strip serves several functions. It's not just because we want to have a pretty corridor. Now, that is the great benefit is it does provide for an attractive corridor with trees and landscaping. But that 4 foot amenity zone, it acts as our surface water mitigation for the sidewalk.
Hmm.
It is a place to put things like mailboxes and fire hydrants and signal pole or utility poles so that it's outside of the accessible route. It also provides a buffer between the pedestrians and the traffic. If you've ever walked along a sidewalk and had a car 2 feet away from you, it is not comfortable.
No, where it looks like their mirror is going to hit you. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not good.
Exactly, and that's another purpose of the buffer as well too, is to provide that, or the mini strip is to provide that buffer so that people feel more comfortable and can actually use the sidewalk,
Hmm.
more comfortably. So there's all these things that that's why we do the mini strip. There's so many things. There's so many reasons as to why we do stuff, that a
Yeah.
lot of people may not realize why, and that's part of the reasons why we do the amenity strip. So
Yeah. Wow.
there's a lot. Yeah, it's there's a lot to it. It's not just a sidewalk.
It's not just pouring cement. No. Gosh.
Nope, nope. And
Wow.
then every couple of years, I have to update the pedestrian facilities plan because things get built, criteria changes. Um, maybe the school no longer has a walk route in this spot. Maybe they've moved it, so I have to reevaluate everything every couple of years. And
Right.
it's a quite the task.
I bet it is.
And yeah, well, and so this facilities plan was created off of the 2015 comp plan. Well, we're updating the comp plan. So the new one gets updated, approved here this month, November. Once that's done, I'm going to have to now look at that comp plan and see how it compares to the current pedestrian facilities plan and see if I need to make any adjustments to my priorities. And I got to give that some thought because we've made changes, added things. Most of it's about the same, but I got to look at some other features and see if I need to add more to this or look at do I need to add more sidewalks? Because once my train of thought is each year I have to look at where we might want to put sidewalks because things change, developments go in, um, traffic changes. Maybe as the school decides to change their bus route from one street to the other, which then says, okay, I never considered sidewalk here. Maybe I should consider it now that we know that buses are now coming down this street.
Right.
That's the kind of stuff I have to take into account.
If there was, like, for example, a new housing development going in, would just having sidewalks in there be part of the development plan? Is that standard to just include that now, or?
Yes, and that's why you see these very strange little sidewalk islands within communities. The developments that go on, depending upon the development, the majority of them have to build sidewalk with any kind of improvement that they do. There are some exceptions that we have out there that don't require that what we call frontage improvements.
Mm-hmm.
The frontage improvements are sidewalk, curb, gutter, storm drainage, and pavement work that needs to be done as part of the project. And when they come in with a development, doesn't matter how wide the development is, if it's 50 feet wide, then they're required to put in a 50-foot long sidewalk.
Wow.
And it could be in the middle of nowhere, and it could be off of our priority network, and we'll never ever build a sidewalk there in anyone's lifetime. Yet there is this little sidewalk.
The road to nowhere.
It's really what it is. But
Yeah.
that's the thing is our other option is to have them pay a fee in lieu. But the fee in lieu is based off of how much it would cost the city to build it for them. And our cost to build is far more expensive than for a private company. And that's because state law says that we have to pay what's called a prevailing wage. It's a wage that's set by the state through the labor and industries that says you have to pay people of certain trades this amount of money. And private folks don't have to do that. And usually the rates are
Oh,
much higher than what the private pays. So yeah,
so much. So much. Jeez.
yeah, yeah. It's very complicated.
It is. Wow.
But that's sidewalks for you. It's
God.
I mean, you'll see that sidewalks are never the same everywhere you go. Sometimes we have to adjust because of other concerns. A perfect example is the walkways and waterways. We just finished on 68th Avenue. You'll see that there's a planting strip in some areas, but in a lot of areas there are no planting strips. We had to make a conscious decision to not put in that planting strip because we didn't want to deal with the ramifications of putting the planting strip. So putting in the planting strip would have required us to cut down a lot of the trees along 68th Avenue and building 6-7 foot high walls, and it just would have been a very costly project to do. So we consciously decided the amenity strip, it's in the public's best interest not to put in the amenity strip, the planting strip, to save the trees and to avoid the excess cost of building walls. But since we built the sidewalk without the planting strip, we had to mitigate for storm drainage, so we had to put in these large detention vaults in the roadway to mitigate for that.
Oh.
So that was the trade-off, but that was probably still cheaper than tearing out all the trees and building these tall walls.
Right, right.
So
And people don't like to see trees go. I get that.
exactly. I mean, we still have to remove trees. It's if
Sometimes, yeah.
and this is the dilemma that we have, and it's kind of the dilemma we're seeing on our 61st Avenue sidewalk repair project. Is this a lot of times we have to choose between pedestrian accessibility and mobility and climate,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes we need to put a sidewalk through here, but there's a row of trees. If
Right.
we don't put a sidewalk, then people have to walk on this 1 foot shoulder and hope that they can get through there before a bunch of cars come through. Very uncomfortable, not fun, especially if it's not a sleepy little neighborhood area.
Right.
And sometimes we'd say, well, the trees have to go. There's our other option is to buy someone's property, which a
Oh,
lot of people
jeez.
do.
Don't want that. Yeah. Gosh.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, well, what do we do? Yes, we love these trees. We don't want to take them out, but we also need to build a sidewalk. We don't have the room. Something has to give. And
Right.
unfortunately, that's why you see us chopping down trees, is because we need to provide that pedestrian safety for folks.
Yeah.
And we want to encourage people to walk. If we don't build the sidewalks, they will not come.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll just drive everywhere. So
Mm-hmm.
so we're trying to get cars off the road, which helps with the climate, get people to walk, get people to do mass transit, get people to bike. All of that adds to it, and we have to make those tough choices.
Yeah.
But when we do tear down a tree and we build something, we put in another tree, maybe not as grand as the one we took out, but we're doing something. It's the trade-off that we have to make.
Yeah.
So the problem we live in a built environment is we have to. I always tell everybody our projects, our road projects, our sidewalk projects are just like your kitchen remodel. You need to do it. You want to do it. You don't know what mess you're getting yourself into until you start ripping out the walls, and then you start saying, "Oh, what's this? Oh, what's that? Oh, geez, I can't do this. I was going to do this. No, it won't work. How do I pivot?"
Uh-huh. It just
Yeah,
snowballs. Yeah.
yeah. We're one big giant kitchen remodel here, trying to figure out how to take some old situation and expand it and make it a functional kitchen.
Right. Oh my gosh. So much that goes into it. Well, any final thoughts for the citizens?
No, if anybody is interested in looking at our pedestrian facilities plan or want to know what or how we've proposed certain projects, we've got the plan listed on our webpage under our Public Works Engineering section. You can grab it, look at it. Any questions, they can give me a call and I can help explain it as much as I possibly can. But that plan tells you exactly where a sidewalk is proposed, its limits. It's got the scoring criteria. It even says how much it's going to cost. We have a map which shows where we're proposing all that stuff. So if you want to know if a sidewalk's coming to a neighborhood near you, then you can look at that plan and that will give you an idea. Yeah.
Awesome. Wow. Well, thank you so much, John. This has been very educational. I appreciate you. Appreciate your time.
Pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Let's Talk Kenmore. Be sure to check back for more interesting topics and conversations. And as always, don't forget to ask yourself, where's the fun?